Welcome back to our channel, where we dive deep into the fascinating world of literature. Today, we're traveling back to the early 18th century, a time known as the Augustan Age, or the Neoclassical period. If you've ever heard of the Age of Reason, this is it. From roughly 1700 to 1745, England saw a huge shift in culture, politics, and, of course, literature. This era was all about order, logic, and looking back to the classical ideals of ancient Rome and Greece for inspiration. Think of it as a time when writers believed in rules, reason, and a perfectly balanced line of poetry. So, why was it called the Augustan Age? Well, the name comes from the reign of the Roman Emperor Augustus, which was considered a golden age of literary brilliance. English writers of this period saw themselves as the heirs to that tradition. They admired the clarity, elegance, and wit of Roman poets like Horace, Virgil, and Ovid, and they tried to emulate that style in their own work. This wasn't just about copying the classics, though. It was about applying classical principles to the social and political issues of their own time. It was a period of incredible intellectual energy, often called the Enlightenment, where thinkers believed that human reason could solve society's problems. This belief in reason and order is the key to understanding everything produced during this time. The literature of the Augustan Age has a very distinct flavor. Forget the wild, emotional outbursts of later periods. Here, the focus was on wit, satire, and public commentary. Poetry was often written in heroic couplet stats, to rhyming lines of iambic pentameter, which created a sense of balance and control. Writers used this structured form to make sharp observations about society, politics, and human nature. Satire was the weapon of choice for many, allowing them to critique the follies and vices they saw around them. From corrupt politicians to the silly trends of high society, they believed literature should have a moral purpose. It should instruct as well as delight. Now, you can't talk about the Augustan Age without mentioning its two biggest literary superstars, Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift. These two figures perfectly capture the spirit of the era, though in very different ways. Let's start with Alexander Pope. He was the undisputed master of the heroic couplet, and a poet who truly embodied the neoclassical ideal of what oft was thought, but ne'er so well expressed. Pope was a perfectionist. He polished his lines until they shone with wit and precision. One of Pope's most famous works is The Rape of the Lock. Don't be alarmed by the title. It's actually a mohepic, a hilarious poem that uses the grand, epic style of Homer's Iliad to describe a trivial social incident. A wealthy lord snipping off a lock of a lady's hair without her permission. By treating this minor event with epic seriousness, Pope satirizes the vanity and silliness of the aristocratic world. It uses gods, goddesses, and epic battles. But instead of armies clashing, we have card games and flirtatious glances. It's a brilliant example of how Augustan writers used classical forms to comment on contemporary life. It's funny, it's clever, and it's a masterclass in poetic technique. Another essential work by Pope is an essay on man. This is a philosophical poem that tries to explain humanity's place in the universe. It's where you'll find the famous line, "To err is human, to forgive divine." The poem argues that while the universe might seem chaotic and unjust to us, it's all part of a grand, divine plan that we, with our limited human perspective, simply can't fully grasp. It's a powerful expression of the Enlightenment belief in an orderly, rational universe governed by a divine watchmaker. Pope is essentially trying to vindicate the ways of God to man, showing that whatever is right. Now let's turn to the other giant of the age, Jonathan Swift. If Pope was the polished, witty poet, Swift was the fierce, biting. He was an Irish clergyman who was deeply angered by the social injustices and political corruption he witnessed. His satire isn't just clever, it's often dark, angry, and designed to shock the reader into seeing the truth. Swift's most famous work is, of course, Gulliver's Travels. On the surface, it looks like a children's adventure story about a man who travels to fantastical lands inhabited by tiny people, giants, flying islands, and talking horses. But it's so much more than that. It's one of the most savage satires ever written. Each voyage is a critique of a different aspect of European society. The Lilliputians, for example, with their petty wars over which end of an egg to crack, are a stand-in for the absurd political conflicts of Europe. The Houyhnhnms, the rational, intelligent horses who rule over the brutish, human-like yahoos, represent the ultimate critique of humanity itself. Swift forces us to look at our own species through the eyes of an outsider and see our greed, irrationality, and ugliness. It's a powerful and deeply pessimistic work that questions the very idea of human progress. But if you think Gulliver's Travels is intense, you haven't read Swift's A Modest Proposal. This is perhaps the most shocking piece of satire in the English language. In this short essay, Swift addresses the terrible poverty and famine in Ireland. His modest proposal to solve the problem is for the poor Irish to sell their children as food for the rich. He lays out this horrific idea with cold, economic logic, complete with recipes and calculations of profit. Of course, Swift doesn't actually want people to eat babies. The essay is a work of irony, designed to shock his English audience into recognizing their own cruel and inhumane treatment of the Irish people. By presenting such a monstrous solution, he's saying, look at what your policies are doing. The reality is almost as monstrous as what I'm proposing. It's a masterpiece of rhetorical strategy, using horror to expose a moral outrage. While Pope and Swift were the titans, they weren't the only important writers. This period also saw the rise of journalism and the modern novel. Writers like Daniel Defoe and Samuel Richardson began telling stories about ordinary people, which was a radical idea at the time. Defoe's Robinson Crusoe is often considered one of the first English novels. It is a story about a man stranded on a desert island who uses his reason and hard work to survive and build a new society from scratch. This perfectly reflects the Augustan values of individualism, self-reliance, and the power of human ingenuity. Another key development was the rise of the periodical essay, thanks to Joseph Addison and Richard Steele. Their publications, The Tatler and The Spectator, were like the influential blogs of their day. They published short, witty essays on everything from manners and fashion to morality and literature. They aimed to bring philosophy out of closets and libraries, schools and colleges, to dwell in clubs and assemblies, at tea tables, and in coffee houses. They helped shape public opinion and created a new, more refined standard of public discourse, moving conversation away from just politics and toward culture and social behavior. So, to sum it up, the Augustan Age was a period defined by a love for reason, order, and classical ideals. It was an age of brilliant wit and savage satire, where writers like Pope and Swift used highly structured forms to critique the world around them. They believed that literature had a job to do, to correct, to instruct, and to improve society. From the polished couplets of Pope to the dark, ironic prose of Swift, the literature of this era offers a fascinating window into a time when intellectuals truly believed in the power of the human mind to make sense of a chaotic world. It's a world of rules, yes, but within those rules, they found incredible freedom for creativity and commentary. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to the 18th century. I hope you have a new appreciation for the Age of Reason and its literary giants. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more literary history, and let me know in the comments which writer or period you'd like to see covered next. Until next time, keep reading.